Ever since we discovered that we could put electronic devices up into space, into Earth orbit, with Sputnik in 1957, we've been flinging them up there at a fairly good rate, especially in the last few years. Big, little, near and far. We've got all kinds of stuff flying around out there. It's hard to get accurate numbers because I've looked at several sources and they all have different totals, but the number seems to be somewhere between 11,500 and like 13,000 satellites in operation, at least in orbit right now. The three main kinds of orbit are, generally speaking, low Earth orbit, which is between 200 and 2,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. It has a fast orbital period, the lowest latency for communication because it's closer to the Earth. And these are usually used for Earth observation, reconnaissance, and communication constellations like Starlink. Examples would be the International Space Station, Hubble Telescope, and as I mentioned, Starlink. Medium Earth orbit, or MEO, would be between 2,000 and about 36,000 kilometers. These would have an orbital period of 2 to 24 hours, depending how far they are and how fast they're going. This is commonly used for navigation satellites like GPS, GLONASS, and Galileo. Geosynchronous orbit, GSO, or geostationary orbit, GEO, altitudes approximately 36,000 kilometers above the equator. And in this case, the orbital period matches the Earth's rotation, which is why it's called geosynchronous or geostationary. In other words, it appears stationary from the Earth's surface. This is used for communications and weather satellites, for like TV stations and so on. Satellites at lower Earth orbits don't stay in orbit forever, and older faulty spacecraft sometimes fall back to Earth, usually under control, but sometimes just by accident. The LEO satellites experience what's called orbital decay, the drag force caused by interaction with the few air molecules that exist at lower altitudes slow the satellite down, reducing its orbital altitude. If the orbit's not corrected, gravity will eventually pull the satellite back to into the Earth's atmosphere, where they'll generally just burn up in re-entry. By far the biggest proportion of satellites occupying the low Earth orbit band is Starlink, currently at about 47% of the total of satellites in that band. And Starlink have been adding satellites to its constellation at a pretty amazing clip. For example, in the first 5 months of 2024, they added 853 new satellites. So this is a pretty aggressive growth, and the problems associated with all these satellites is only going to get more pronounced as time goes by. One of the things that is an issue is, for astronomers and space experts, is light pollution from the satellites. Those reflections and that kind of thing as the satellites pass overhead. And there's some environmental concerns too, as the frequent deorbiting of satellites can release potentially harmful materials into the upper atmosphere, which wouldn't matter with just a few satellites, but as we're getting so many now, it's becoming a sort of an issue that's causing concern. Companies like SpaceX have tried to implement design modifications to reduce the satellite reflectivity, and international organizations are working to establish guidelines for responsible use of the space above the Earth. So as usual, we tend to find something that really works very well, and then we kind of mess it up by cluttering things up and just throwing things into orbit. Yeah, we're just kind of a messy people, I guess. It seems like there should be a better way to manage that kind of stuff, and I think they're trying to do things like get satellite buster spacecraft into play where they can actually go up and clean up some of the older satellites that are still maybe in orbit but are not working anymore, and they don't have any control over them. They can't fire their thrusters enough to make them deorbit, so the only way they can do anything is kind of blast them out of the sky, so to speak. So that may be something we'll hear more about in the coming years as they try to clean up the detritus that's just flying around up there. Because right now it's getting kind of hairy. There's a lot of stuff up there. Hey, thanks for listening. There are some links below if you want to check them out, and catch you next time. Bye.